What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of RHOX Garage. I'm your host, Dan, and on today's episode, we're going to be installing part number ACC-1512, which is the 12-volt version of our RHOXAir fan. Now, we also have a 48-volt version of it, part number ACC-1548, and that's going to install in pretty much the exact same way, except our electrical connections are going to be a little bit different on the 48-volt version. So before we get started with our install today, let's take a look at everything that comes in the kit and the tools we're going to need to perform the installation. So when you receive your kit, you're going to have your RHOXAir fan unit itself. You're going to have your two mounting brackets, and you're also going to have your bag of hardware and electrical connections. So now that we've taken a look at everything that comes in the kit, let's take a look at the tools we're going to need to perform the installation. First up, we have our cordless drill with a 1/4-inch drill bit, as well as a 3/8 drill bit. After that, we have our ratchet wrench with a 10mm socket and a 10mm open-ended wrench. We have a set of wire strippers and crimpers, a tape measure, a marking tool, a black paint pen, and of course, some safety glasses. Now, before we get started, we just want to go over a few safety precautions. And now, as always, before we get started, we just want to make sure that we set our parking brake, turn our cart off, and if we have an electric cart, we're going to flip the tow run switch to the tow position. Now, also, because we are working with the electrical system on this cart, we're going to go ahead and completely disconnect our battery. The first step in our installation process is we're going to attach our mounting brackets to the unit itself. Once those brackets are attached, we can go ahead and figure out where we're going to be mounting it on the cart. So because we are installing our RHOXAir onto the top of the cart, we're going to go ahead and mount our brackets to the bottom side of the RHOXAir fan. So the bottom side is the side that has more of the bulbous contour to it. So we're going to go ahead and pop our brackets on, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that these have a little bit of a downward angle to them, so when they're mounted flush with the top, the fan will be pointed down towards the passengers of the cart. These are just going to pop right onto the unit. We're going to press them all the way down until you hear them snap. We don't need to tighten the bolt just yet. We're going to do that after we get our holes drilled and marked. Going to do the exact same thing on the other side, doing our best to make sure that these two brackets remain parallel. So now that our brackets are mounted to the unit itself, we're going to go ahead and hold up the unit to the top of the cart. From there, we're going to go ahead and mark our mounting locations, and then we'll go ahead and drill those holes. So on our mounting bolts on the top side of the top, we want to make sure that we first put on one of our rubber-backed metal washers, and then after that is going to be one of the rubber flat washers. So now with our holes drilled and our hardware installed, we're going to go ahead and place a rubber washer on the underside of the bolt. What that's going to do is that's going to allow a watertight seal on the hardware so that water doesn't drip down through. If you're doing this install by yourself, it can get a little bit tricky to install the hardware while you're holding up the fan unit itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my rubber-backed metal washers, and I'm going to place it on each one of these bolts on the passenger side, and then I'm going to thread the nut on just a little bit so that it'll hold the unit while I'm installing it. So now that we have all of our hardware loosely installed, we can go ahead and tighten it all down. So now that our fan is mounted, our next step is to figure out what we're going to do with our wires. You could just go ahead and zip tie them to the top strut and run them down the side of the cart and connect them to the battery, but to have a cleaner installation, we're going to go ahead and run our wires through the top strut. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and drill a hole and then start feeding our wires down through the top strut. However, before we feed those wires through the strut, we are going to tape the two ends together with some electrical tape, as that's going to make the whole system going down a little bit more rigid. So now before we run our wires down through the top strut, we want to make sure that we deburr the hole that we just drilled so that we don't tear the wires as they're running down the strut. If you're having any issues feeding the wires down through the top strut, we can go ahead and remove any of the hardware that is in the top strut. So for us, we have a windshield mounted on the cart, so we're going to go ahead and remove this lower windshield bolt, as well as the 2 lower mounting bolts for the top strut. And that'll allow us to have a free and clear path all the way through the strut. So now that we have our wires fed down through our top strut, our next step is to run the wires underneath of the bottom side of the cart and bring them up into the battery compartment so we can make our electrical connections. So now that our wires are run into our battery compartment, we can go ahead and make our electrical connections. We're going to go ahead and attach the spade connector to the red wire, and then we're going to attach the round connector to the black wire. Once that's done, we can attach our fuse to the red wire and hook it up to the battery. So now that you've made all of your electrical connections and you've verified that the unit works, our last step is to reinstall any hardware that we removed and also tighten down and secure any of the loose wires away from any moving parts. Once that's done, that's going to complete the installation for part number ACC-1512 on our E-Z-Go RXV. Thanks for watching this episode of RHOX Garage, and I'll see you guys next time.